Christina, thank you, first of all, for being on our little show called The Brief. And what we do is we like to talk to experts in their respective fields. And you are an expert in accessibility.
Thank you. Good morning. And I don't consider myself an expert as opposed to someone who just knows how to talk over everyone else. That's all.
Love it.
But thank you.
Let's start by telling us a little about the Harlem Independent Living Center and what you guys do there.
Well, the Harlem Independent Living Center was incorporated in 1991. And basically, it was because the people of that community, the village of Harlem, wanted to know why didn't they have an independent living center in their area. They wanted someone that looked like them, that understood the culture, that understood the language. And they went for the assistance of then Assemblyman Wright, and at the time, Senator Patterson, the late Dr. Herbert Thornhill, and the late Dr. Sylvia Walker from Howard University, and community leaders to make sure that we came into existence. And the purpose of every independent living center is to permanently remove barriers, be it physical or attitudinal, within the community so that those who are disabled are able to function independently. We do the same as every other independent living center. We go about making or enforcing systemic change. What helps us helps the general community. Think of elevators for MTA, so that you could get to those subways that are down in the core of the earth. Think of the bus lifts. Think of accessible taxis. All of that benefits the entire community, not just my community that I serve. We don't serve just Harlem. We serve Northern Manhattan, but also we serve anyone that self-identifies as a person of color. So they could be anywhere, and we will work with them as long as it's disability related. When I first came on, the role of advocacy was still a little bit different for the center that I work with, Harlem Independent Living Center. And it was about teaching the staff first how to advocate, how to self-advocate, so that you could then assist the community to advocate, and getting the community to understand that we exist, that a person could have a hearing loss and still use their voice. A person could be legally blind, but not use the assistance of a guide dog or the white cane. When you see someone with the service animal, what does that mean? If you see someone signing, that does not mean they're in a gang. So it was always about educating the community, educating the police, educating the consumers who come to us, because just because you're disabled doesn't mean you understand your rights. So it's going out there and just educating everyone, but in a way that's sensitive. You don't need to be negative when you inform the community, no, you're not compliant with the federal law. You can do it in such a way that's nice and informative. If they continue to be non-compliant, well, then you just keep ramping it up. But always start out nicely, because people just don't know. It's not a matter of them being mean or on purpose. It's a lot of times they don't know. They don't have an understanding.
How do you describe accessibility to somebody?
I use accessibility as getting rid of barriers so that I can do the job that you would do, just without the impediments that you've put in place. It's attitudinal also, because curb cuts can be put in, but if the community doesn't understand why, then it doesn't matter, because when the curb cuts need to be repaired, you're going to have people fighting you. If you talk about building, when you're building something, make sure it's accessible to start. If you don't educate them, then you're still going to have issues. So it's just about saying, I want to do the job, or I want to function as independently as you, but I need to have some things in place first so I can do the same thing. It's not special treatment, as some people believe. It's saying anyone can join the disabled community at any time. no matter what your race, no matter what your education, no matter what your religion is, you can join at an instant. So our belief is if you work with us now, you never know who might need it later. So you will all benefit. That's why I say it's not just for our community, it's for the good of the whole.
One of the things I start to think about is accessibility is so directly associated with equity. The idea, which is different than equality, the idea that we need to ensure that everyone has the fair access to the opportunities across the board. Obviously, the conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion increasing. And I don't know if everybody always includes disabled people in that conversation, but it is important. And then especially the other layer of people of color who are also disabled. And there is a thing about privilege for able-bodied people, if that is that the correct terminology. And I've learned so much
Mm-hmm.
working with you as well.
Wow. So, first, I need to just address one thing when you talked about inclusion. Yes, that is a buzzword right now. Everyone's talking about inclusion, but they're not talking about us. We're not even thought of to be forgotten in the conversation. We just don't come to mind. And so, when you talk about inclusion, that means us. So, that means if you have a politician out there who's giving a town hall, it needs to be captioned. You need to have an interpreter, an ASL interpreter. If you're going to have materials on Zoom, it has to be able to, so that people with low vision can see it with a larger size font. If you're going to hold an event that is on site, then it has to be physically accessible. You can't have it in a location that has stairs to the entrance, but an elevator once you get in, because that does the person in a wheelchair no good. Inclusion is from the beginning, always. There's a motto within the disability community: nothing about us without us. Don't plan for us if we're not at the table, because I guarantee you're going to get it wrong.
What would be some pro tips that you would give to an organization to navigate accessibility more effectively?
Good question. Thank you. First, no one's an expert. We don't expect you to be. So when I give workshop trainings and so forth, the first thing I always say is see the person, see me, not just the parts of what's disabled. See me. And then, because if you don't know, ask me. Don't assume, because I guarantee at some point you're going to get it wrong. And don't tell me what I need. Let me tell you. It's good to look around your space. For example, if you know you have someone who's coming in a wheelchair, how do you change things around? If you're talking to someone in a wheelchair, how about you sit down so that you're eye to eye? If you're talking to someone who is blind or has a vision loss, and you're trying to describe where the restroom is, don't just say, oh, well, it's over there. You have to be what we call audio descriptive. Explain. Take a look and see what would be an impediment for you as a non-disabled person if the power went out and you had to leave your space. Could you navigate it? So if you can't do it, why would someone else who's disabled be able to? But again, just ask. Doesn't hurt. We're okay with it. We already know. So ask us. Work with us. It'll help in the long run to avoid possible lawsuits, which will happen.
We were lucky enough to work with HILC through, I believe, barrier-free living and the mayor's office, and we made some HIV awareness videos for the deaf and hard of hearing community. That was a couple years ago, and those were received very well. And I think recently you've done, we had a small part to play in helping you get the financial literacy course over the finish line. We're just one of the many partners working on that with HILC, and that really came out well. What's next for HILC? What are you planning?
My vision of HILC is that we are the agency that everyone goes to just to say, am I doing this right? Can you assist us? Can you just show us what needs to be done? Um, there's so much we can do. And the goal, I would hope, is that eventually we're not needed because the community knows, they're self aware that you no longer need us to go into a restaurant and say, do you know you're not accessible and you need a ramp at the front door so people can come in? Do you, or to go to a corporation and say, it's wonderful you built a building full of glass and chrome. Do you see how the sun is hitting it? Did you notice that people are kind of getting close because they don't know there's a barrier there? You need to put something there, a reflective strip, so that people with low vision or people with cognitive disabilities don't try to walk through the glass wall and injure themselves. Or so that we can say, wow, all the buses are accessible, cabs are accessible, subways have elevators, people don't have attitude. When you go for an interview, you're not looked at sideways because you're in a chair. Or when you request a sign language interpreter, people don't say, or yeah, people don't respond with, you have to bring one on your own. No, the law says the agency providing the service must provide the reasonable accommodation. So a pro tip would be, yeah, it might sound expensive, but promise you, if you don't do it and we or another agency comes to you saying you're non-compliant with the federal law, you're not going to win this case. It's going to cost more in the end. And what about the optics? How does it look to those outside because an agency or a company does not want to provide access? What does that say? If we're talking about inclusion, well, then that means part of it. Inclusiveness means accommodating a request. It's not that hard, really. You can do things that are very simple. Um, you can paint your office in a color that's neutral, but add objects that add depth, so someone with low vision will understand I'm coming into another space. You don't have to buy a lot and pay a lot to make your space accessible. Move the boxes out of the way. You can, if you're buying new furniture for the office, buy something that contrasts with the color of the wall. That all monochromatic chrome look does not work for people with low vision. Doesn't work for seniors a lot of times. So there's a lot to do, but it's not that hard.
One of the things that we're going to start doing is including captions on these videos. So to ensure that that is,
I'm glad you brought that up.
and we have been doing that more and more with all of our videos that go out, which I think, again, it doesn't only help the person
Deaf.
it doesn't only help the deaf and hard of hearing. Plenty of us now use the captions, and we absorb and retain so much more information when we're reading. I think the thing I'm going to take away from this conversation is the nothing about us without us. That's just like such a powerful little phrase to keep tucked in the back of anyone's mind, to just remember. And that applies so universally to all of us. And so, yeah, thank you for that. And thanks for being on The Brief.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here. If I could leave with just one last thing, terminology: deaf, hard of hearing, not deaf mute, not hearing impaired. A person can be blind, legally blind, low vision. Person who uses a chair. It's not wheelchair bound. It's not, we don't use words like physically challenged and so forth. It's disabled. It's okay. But more importantly, just ask my name. I don't need to be identified by a disability. Ask what my name is and identify me as such. And we'll all get along. We'll work from there.
And what a beautiful name it is. Christina Curry.
Thank you both. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Have a great day.